Hey, it's Sully and Jones, and this is Kitchen Table Research. This is our second part to our first episode, The Yogurt Shop Murders, which happened here in Austin, Texas. We're so excited to have you listening again. So this do have an Instagram. Go visit us for evidentiary photos at kitchen.table.research. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at kitchen.table.research@gmail.com. Our reference section is also in the first episode, and Jones is going to lead us off today.
Melvin Stahl is the lead fire investigator on the scene. By 11:51, fire engine number 1 arrives, and by 11:53, the second fire engine has arrived. The fire is burning intensely. The fire department crowbars open the front door. It is smoky and debris is falling. 2 firemen drop down to the floor and they go to the back room and start putting out the fire with hoses. They dump gallons and gallons of water on the scene to mitigate damage to the strip center, not realize that 4 girls lay dead inside. Austin Fire Department go to open the back door for cross ventilation and find that it is left ajar, which is also corroborated by Jorge Barney as he comes out of his back door in the shop next to the yogurt shop. The party owner, Jorge, who is still next door, goes to let the smoke out of his suite and he notices the back doors open. Jorge says he didn't hear anything that night. We'd love to ask him some questions, as he was basically the proverbial fly on the wall. In addition to the water and fire retardant that's being sprayed in the yogurt shop, the overhead pipes have also burst. And so now there's water flooding the area. So this is not only a crime scene, it's a messy fire. Before we talk about the homicides and get to our crime scene, let's talk about doors and locks in this case. The yogurt shop manual has directions on how to clean the store and lock up and leave in their employee manual. At 10:50 at night, workers are instructed to put the key in the front door and lock it so no one can come back in to the front door after 10:50. But people who remain in the yogurt shop can still leave. We know Jennifer put the key in the lock because we mentioned it is still there when the fire department arrives. After the girls finished closing duties, they would lock the door from the side, key inside of an envelope, and slide it under the door, where the opener, who's usually a manager in the morning, would retrieve it and then give it to the next night's closing team. So the only thing that I find unusual about that is that the key gets inside of an envelope and they can actually slide it under the front door. There must be a huge gap there.
Yeah, I've had policies at jobs like this before where you do the same thing, and it's really not a good system.
No, it's really not. The back door, and there's a key to the back door that's located in the locked office. We know the girls unlocked it that day because Eliza's purse is found in the locked office. The manual also states for the girls to leave the trash by the back door before their end of shift, and morning shift was to take the trash out. We are unsure about the back door lock because it was lost with evidence, and so all we know is that a key was needed to open this door, again, which is normally kept in the manager's office. We know the office was not entered during this crime. And after the case not being solved, 10 years later, a forensic analysis looks at the photos of the crime scene. The investigators see tool markings on the side of the door frame, which makes investigators wonder how this door comes to be ajar when they arrive. On December 7th, investigators buy a lock so that they can tame the crime scene. They pop out the circle where the lock is and replace the lock with a new one. But the old lock, which of course was supposed to be placed in evidence, is never found again.
Okay, so back to our crime scene. It's around midnight. A patrol car has seen a fire in the West Hillside Strip Shopping Center, and Austin FD has just pulled in. After the fire has been put out, one firefighter walks up to his supervisor, who is standing out the back door to get some fresh air, says, "I think I saw a foot in there." And he is seeing Amy's foot. So AFD calls Austin Police Department and asks for a homicide detective. The homicide detective on duty that night, his name is John Jones. And John Jones is going to be a forever loved detective in my heart. He's one of those detectives that really cared about his victims and really wanted cases solved the right way. And so we have to thank him for his duty. Jones is quoted as saying, "I had on a new green shirt that night. It remains hanging in my closet. When I wear that shirt again, it will signify that this case has been solved." Jones has a ride along for a TV program that happens to be filming in Austin that night. They are all currently on a suicide attempt of a male trying to jump off a bridge on South Mopac, a main highway that goes through Austin. Jones would get a call at 12:03 and he gets on Mopac headed north to the yogurt shop. As he's driving, he gets two more calls, and these calls are to let him know that they've found another victim and another victim. Jones and the camera crew pull up to the yogurt shop, and Jones tells the film crew to stay seated in the back of the car. Not only has AFD dumped water all over the crime scene, Jones knows this case is going to be a big deal and calls in several experts. He calls in the Tobacco and Firearms Unit, the FBI, and other crime scene institutions in Texas to see if they can come help shed some light on this gruesome scene. Quote, "I look in there and I go, oh my God, there were puddles of water all over the place. The bodies were still smoldering. There was insulation from the ceiling that had dropped down, and it was hot. It was smoky, and I was by myself." His next thought, "I need help. I'd been a policeman for 21 years and I'd never seen anything like it." So that's a quote from Jones from Bev's book. Eliza and Sarah are still in the stack the killer put them on. Jennifer's body has been found in the corner back under the shelf. Quote, "Curled on her, Jennifer's side, she'll lie close to the melted steel shelves against the south wall. Wrists pressed against her spine, one in the thoracic area and the other near her waistline." So basically she has one hand on her waist and the other one is back behind the small of her back. Exploded cans of toppings, paint, and cleaning supplies on the floor all around her. Her face obliterated, a steel girder between her legs. When store manager Therese Price comes, she won't be able to identify the two girls who worked for her. "Quote unquote, they had no faces."
I don't understand why Austin doesn't call the Dallas or Houston crime scene lab, as Austin only has one fingerprint lady.
Well, and I think that's because they just didn't have the resources to send them down now that I've looked into that. So,
well, thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to start again. I don't understand why Austin didn't call the Houston or Dallas crime scene lab, as Austin only has one lady that's responsible for fingerprint. Detective Jones asked for help from other entities like the FBI and the TABC and the ATF, but per usual, forensics could have been better on this case. Because it is 1991, new advances in forensics are being made, and they were able to collect DNA from the scene. Two other advantages is that they had a forensic photographer come in to document the scene before anything is moved, and they do find one DNA profile from one of the girls' assault. One strand of YSTR DNA has 16 alleles, and we're going to discuss that in just a minute. A YSTR DNA, the Y on the front of that means it's from a male, okay? Now, I guess the only thing you get is a YSTR, and if it's a female, you get an STR. I don't think they put an F on there for female.
Well, it would be a Y.
X.
I mean, it would be an X, but
it would be an X.
This is, like you just said, it's DNA that can only be found in males.
YSTR can only be found in males. Trace evidence such as male hair is also collected. Unfortunately, the forensic team missed evidence, and tons of evidence goes missing from this case. I don't know who would steal evidence from such a violent crime scene. Who does that? There's something weird about that.
Do you think that it was an accident, or do you think that somebody came and... Let's talk about it in theories.
The front of the store is not processed. The bathroom's not processed. They do not do basic testing like for accelerant or blood testing or even typing. Irma Rios, who is the one fingerprint lady, she doesn't log the scene. That means taking people in and out of the scene. Booties are not worn, so they're sludging through fire debris and water on the floor. They usually take a crime scene and divide it into grids so that unbiased samples are taken, and it keeps the forensics organized. Irma Rios states she does not collect fingerprints she can't see, so no fingerprints are taken in important areas like the bathroom, where one of those men possibly was that night. We're talking about Army Man, and has surfaces conducive to a good fingerprint. Nor does Irma fingerprint the front area where the men were believed to be sitting. Again, 10 years go by before the forensic photographs are really truly analyzed. And it is realized this booth was not closed down or, quote, cleaned like the other tables in the shop. The Coke and ice are still on the table. The napkins have not been replaced. It doesn't look or appear that it was wiped down with a wet rag. So obviously, if that's true, and we think it is, fingerprints should have been on that table and they did not collect them. Irma does collect the .380 shell casing underneath Amy's body. Remember that the .380 bullet will be found. So let's get into guns a bit. When a gun is shot, the bullet takes a linear path to what barrel is being aimed at. The gunpowder and the tip of the bullet hit the target, and in the meantime, the casing that was holding these components together is ejected out of the side of the gun. So you can find bullets and their shell casings at a scene. At close quarters, an execution-style shot will leave stippling on the victim's skin around where the bullet enters. But in our case, the burned bodies could not be tested for gunpowder stippling. Again, the bullet can also be tested for striation marks, and that means the linear mark that the bullet makes as it goes out of the gun. Casings are also conducive to fingerprints because you have to load your bullets into the gun. A few casings from the .22s, which killed the other three girls, are found at the scene. So brass has a higher melting point than the fire that burned, and so that's why some of those brass casings are intact. The alley dumpsters and the shelf above the girls that melted with the styrofoam, plus other items of evidence, like where the fire was started, are removed. They're placed in the alley as forensic surveys the scene. It disappears. Police knock down the wet sheetrock and remove the shelf that the girls were forced under, along with several mops. The ladder, and there's a picture of it on Instagram, is missing the top two rungs, and it is thought that those burned. But the ladder is placed in the alley with the other large debris, and again, it disappears. They do not go through the trash or the dumpster provided to the yogurt shop because it was taken by trash services. The bodies were not swabbed for accelerant. Other items of forensic value will also go missing from evidence, including 2 pairs of the girls' panties. The belt, but not the buckle, of Amy is never found. Amy had on her brother's FFA jacket, and it is never found. Either these were lost in evidence, or perhaps the perps took the panties and the belt as trophy. It will take 10 to 15 years after this crime for an arson expert to look at those photos taken at the crime scene. What he finds is 2 important clues. The table that was not closed, and it is not until 10 years later that a 2-man theory comes into play because of the statements made by Tim and Margaret. He also finds tool markings on the frame of the back door. We actually have come up with a 3-man theory as well in our theories section for this episode. And of course, we're going to talk about those at the end of the story.
At 3:30 in the morning, police go to notify Eliza's parents that she is deceased. That's got to be one of the worst things I've had to do it. Police knock on the door, and when hearing of her daughter's death, Maria replies, "No, she's upstairs sleeping." Maria and the police officer walk up to Eliza's room, and she is not in her bed. I can't imagine. To lose a child, especially like this, must be the most heartbreaking thing to ever have to go through. It's not fair for your kids to go first at such a young age and in such a terrible way. These cases, especially young females, when I worked in the funeral home, they really get to you. All the girls, including Eliza, had such great opportunities, and I believe they were all meant to be somebody in this world. And these monsters, they stole that away from them. The Harbison sisters and Amy are all supposed to be at a sleepover at the Harbison's house. By 5:30, police have to notify the Cerruchis that two of their daughters have been murdered. Barbara, the mother of the two girls, then has to call their father Mike and break the news to him. She actually can't do it, and she hands it to her current husband, who's named Skippy, to give that news. Amy's family would be the last to be notified. By 7:30, the parents were called in and are asked tough questions. Like, were our daughters raped before they were killed? Were they tortured? How long did it take? Did they suffer? But Detective Jones cannot answer these questions yet. And by about noon, the autopsies were completed. And so later that afternoon, he can call in the families to answer some of their questions. Unfortunately, Jones has to tell the parents, yes, the girls were raped and unfortunately murdered, but that they were all together and died together, and that their deaths would have been pretty quick. So not only are these parents extremely obviously affected by this homicide, people just don't understand the ripple effects of a homicide. It touches so many people, and to have all four girls killed at once in such a horrific way sends shockwaves through the community. I mean, this changed the city of Austin. On Mopac, the highway we talked about earlier, there's a huge sign that goes up saying, "Do you know who killed these girls?" And I believe that picture's on our Instagram. Not only that, but by the end of this year, 1991, another grisly murder would occur in Austin. The abduction and murder of Colleen Reed, which we will get into in later episodes. So let's get into some information that came from the autopsies. The ME's office comes to the scene. The first ME on scene, which I'm not even going to call him an ME because I think he's an autopsy tech and not an actual medical examiner. His name is Les Carpenter, and we will have several questions about him later. But because he is not a medical examiner, they have to call in the medical examiner from Houston because the Travis County or the Austin medical examiner is on vacation. The Houston ME drives up, which is about a 2-hour drive, and he arrives and does all 4 autopsies back to back. So this Les guy, he wants to remove the bodies before the ME gets there, but Jones and his partner Huckabee says that they need to investigate the scene before the bodies are removed, and they want to wait until the ME gets on the scene. But Les really wants the bodies. Huckabee again denies Les's demands because he knows this homicide is going to be a big deal. Thomas, the Harris County ME, arrives, and the girls are bagged and taken to the Travis County medical examiner's office. We have pictures of this on our Instagram. The medical examiner confirms that the girls were sexually assaulted. We now know or believe, or the leading theory is that all 4 girls were raped. Some were bound and gagged, leaving ligature marks behind. Others weren't. The ME finds the 22 in Sarah, Jennifer, and Eliza's brain. The 22 that misses Amy goes through the side of her cheek and then at the top of her skull. So it basically, the 380 shot travels between the top of her skull bone, like out this front part of her forehead. So it actually doesn't go into the brain. It kind of skirts the outside of her skull, yet this still would have shattered her skull most likely, and she would have died fairly quickly. They also find a laceration across her face. This crime happens quickly. It's organized, and more than one person had to have done this. During the autopsies, it's noted again that Les is continuing to quote unquote mouth off and complain while Thomas is doing the autopsies. Thomas later says he feels rushed, and what should have been like normally homicide autopsies take just a little bit longer than a regular autopsy. So it should have been a 3 to 4 hours per autopsy for Thomas to do, and he does them all in about 2 hours each. So I do think that it's one of those things that it's like if the Travis County medical examiner would have just been here and not on vacation, things might have gone so differently. If it's missed in the autopsy, the evidence could be gone forever. It's so important that autopsies are done correctly because you only have one chance before these girls are either buried or cremated.
So on December 29th, Jones does a press conference. He announces in the profile of the killers that he believes 2 people perpetrated this crime. There was no forced entry. All 4 girls were dead before emergency personnel and Austin Fire Department came in. The perps did not bring in any of their own materials like accelerant, ligatures, or things of that nature. They did bring the guns in. When we get into some questions we have on the case, we're going to come back to this. Jones also states that Amy spent the most time with her attackers. The first shot missed her brain and she was shot with a secondary weapon. She's the only one that is also strangled with her own sock, I believe. He thinks the fire damage was part of the perps' MO and knew they would set the fire premeditatively. The perps knew styrofoam burns like napalm. Amy was also the only one struck across the face and was the last to die. She's a hero. At only 13 years old, this little cowgirl fights to her death. Autopsy shows that all girls fought their attackers. Jones believes the perps were under the influence of drugs, probably crack cocaine. Leaving the syrup and ice cream scoop is seen as a message or a fuck you to the police, possibly a signature from the killers. The perps were not there for the robbery or the money. They only got $540. Under the register, a bank bag full of thousands of dollars, which could be seen easily, was left at the scene. The perps didn't even take it. If they had gotten into the office, there was a floor safe with money in it. And the key to the floor safe was in the money bag. So really the motive doesn't appear to be money. The girls would have gladly given up that information, but the office is never entered. Eliza's purse was found in the office untouched, so we know that she entered the office when she first got on shift. Jones believes there's one really aggressive aggressor and that the other man is more submissive. And not only does the aggressor receive pleasure from the crime, but he loves having control over the passive perp. Jones states he believes this man is a white male in his mid to late 20s, a dominant personality but underachiever. He's disciplined and has disciplinary problems. He's explosive. He does not follow rules. He's angered easily, most likely a drug and alcohol user. He's impulsive and does not consider the consequences of his actions. He will confront people, but only if he feels he's the more dominant person. This aggressive perp is unemployed, not dependable, has no remorse, but he's also stressful or fearful of getting caught. Jones believes the crime did not go as planned, and we think he's talking about Amy right here. The secondary perp, is extremely loyal to the primary perp, and they stay close to talk about the crime. He's a violent offender. This is a capable person, like a serial killer or a pedophile, Jones says. 8 days later, after Jones puts out his profile, a lady who is at North Coast Mall calls the police to say there are 4 hoodlums with a gun at the mall. The police arrest the kid carrying the gun. His name is Maurice Pierce. He's 15 and he's carrying a .22 at the mall. Maurice implicates 3 other friends and says they were with him during this crime, and he writes this in his confession. The 3 other men implicated are Forrest Welborn, Michael Scott, and Robert Springsteen. Not to be confused with Michael Scott from The Office, although these boys are about as smart as Michael Scott from The Office is. Jones immediately calls bullshit, and due to lack of evidence, the 4 boys are released. The bullets do not match after striation testing was done on the .22. From the beginning, Jones says these boys weren't smart enough to perpetrate their time. Quote, they were so dumb they couldn't put together a 2-person parade. So could it have been 4 teenage boys? Garza, with Austin Police Department, another officer, says that the scene was evil and one of the worst scenes he's ever been on. And he had to go to the psychologist at work to work through some of his PTSD. So do several other firefighters who worked the crime scene. Jones, who is not only a homicide detective but served in Vietnam, says this was the hardest scene he's ever seen. He states pure carnage. Jones adds that the entire scene looked like it was a black and white with muted tones. The only color of on the scene was the color of the girls who had been so viciously burned. Years go by, 10 years, and our beloved Detective Jones has been taken off this case because he has not solved it. So a new detective is assigned. His name is Hector Polanco. Hector Polanco wants this case solved, not only to figure out the actual killers, but he wants the case closed. So you can see on our IG page a picture of one detective putting a gun to Michael Scott's head in the forced confession that Scott and Springsteen would be implicated on the murder of 4 girls. Not even the kid who was originally arrested for carrying the 22 is convicted. So if the police were right in thinking that these 4 boys did it, either 2 murderers are walking free or 2 innocent men are now on life sentences in death row. On appeal in 2006, because the boys were convicted, one of them was sentenced to life in prison. One of them was sentenced to the death penalty. The boys are released from prison because there are several reasons, mainly the evidence. There was a little crook in the case in the way that it was presented. You are supposed to be allowed to confront your accuser and ask questions of your accuser and
Yeah,
where they got
they
that
are supposed to be
information.
able to cross-examine them, and since they were used to testify against each other and knew that they were probably not guilty, they didn't want to put them like in court together where they could face each other. And so because they didn't do that, like you said, it goes against the Sixth Amendment right, which is the right to face your accuser.
Wow. So these boys are released from prison. Now the public's confused. Did the boys do it or did the boys not do it? My attitude is those boys did not do this crime.
Same.
They're just, I kind of agree with Detective Jones. I mean, 15, 16-year-old boys are simply not organized to be able to commit a murder of this caliber. So DNA has become more accessible. I mean, we're 30 years away from this crime now. DNA comes back as not a match to the 2 boys or any of the 4 boys that were hanging out together this mall, one with a 22 that did not match ballistic. Michael Scott and Springsteen are eventually released and are free men today. Forrest lives not too far from us in a small town in central Texas, and he works in his mechanic shop. Maurice Pierce was living in Louisville and has another run-in with the police where he pulls a knife and he's shot by police and killed. Springsteen is in West Virginia, they believe, and Scott is in Missouri. Can you imagine the devastation that being falsely accused, and 2 of them were sentenced to life and the death penalty, must have had on those kids? That's a travesty in itself.
And sometimes I think that there were 8 victims to this crime. I mean, those 4 teenage boys, they had their lives and their opportunities taken from them, first of all.
And they were vilified.
Right. Maurice Pierce, the reason that he was shot by police was actually because he had developed a phobia of the police because of what had happened to him. And so I don't believe the police are coming for him or they're pulling him over on a regular stop. Like, he's not really doing anything major, but because of his lack of trust for police, I believe he pulls a knife and then he is shot by police. So again, it's another life lost.
Yeah, it's another lost life.
Right. Okay. In the meantime, back in late December of 1991, a few weeks after the yogurt shop murders, a woman by the name of Colleen Reed is kidnapped at a car wash within a 20-mile radius or less of these murders. So within 3 weeks and within 20 miles. The serial killer who was responsible for this is named Kenneth McDuff and would later be put on death row for this crime. We do cover him in our 3rd episode, so stay tuned. McDuff was a lifelong criminal who loves drugs, rape, and murder, and already has several murders under his belt by 1991. He has gotten out of prison after being put on death row, and he continues to kill underage women and sex workers. Yes, you heard that right. He was put on death row and he was taken off and then paroled. So we will get into these nuances in our next episode, Kenneth McDuff. Stay tuned. And then after that, we're going to go over the Las Cruces Bowling Alley massacre, which a lot of people think have similarities with this case. So we're going to dive into that and see if we can find any connections. Soon after Colleen is killed, a woman is killed in the Austin area in a sexual crime that included 3 Mexican men. Jones swears one of the suspects, because they had composite sketches, looks exactly like his composite sketch, and they are able to track these men down. The 3 men confess to this murder and they are extradited back to Mexico. Mexico tries them and finds them guilty of the yogurt shop murders. But the men, knowing nothing of the crime, and later DNA comes back not to match, Jones does not believe that these three men are responsible. Okay, so now we've gone through the four teenagers. We've gone through the three Mexican men. No one seems to be speaking, and no one knows who could have perpetrated these murders. Many other suspects were looked at, including PIBs, or what they call people in black. So at this time, there is a showing of Rocky Horror Picture at North Cross Mall, and it happens kind of after the mall is closed. I think a theater production, or they use the movie theater to do late night productions of Rocky Horror Picture Show, which was really popular at the time. So a lot of these people are walking through this area at night, and they're called people in black. Sean Smith, or Buddha, which he cross dresses just for Rocky Horror Picture Show, I want to recognize that, he confesses to the crime. So Jones asks him to do a polygraph, at which point he refuses and is released. So within the first couple of weeks, we have several people confessing to this crime, and Jones is tracking down all these leads, but nothing's coming up. The Austin Police Department looked at over 350 suspects and have actually DNA profiled almost 300 people in this case. Serial killers and pedophiles in the area, police officers that were busted on a porn, prostitution, basically anyone that went to school with or knew these girls. Other detectives that are on the case, they now go around collecting evidence, like unsolicited. So they're picking up old Coke cans that people have drank off, or cigarette butts. And even though that's illegal, nothing has come back to match the DNA.
In 2018, new information comes out around the 30-year anniversary of this case, which is what prompted us to do this case first. Over a year ago, we had this idea, and it took this long to bring this project to fruition. Again, a YSTR strand, which is DNA only submitted by a male, was isolated from Amy's vaginal swab. A private lab working for the FBI says they did a DNA survey, and the samples were collected from inmates in several geographic locations, and those inmates submitted their DNA anonymously. But a 16 allele match popped up. Because the DNA was collected anonymously, the FBI refused to release any other information, stating that, quote, because the DNA only had 16 markers, it could match thousands or even more, including relatives of this man, and that they could not condone a nationwide manhunt on such little information. I still feel like they could have released the names of the men unless they were done totally anonymously. Like, did anybody keep track of whose DNA they were collecting?
I think they used a number, and so it was completely anonymous. Yeah, but could you have tracked it back to, that they tracked it back to, was that sample taken from this prison or this state? And maybe they could have, gone from there. But I do feel like, I hate to say this because you want there to be DNA in the case because you want it solved, but really, this is not a great piece of DNA.
So a DNA analyst working this case states normally 66 at least, and really over 100 alleles are needed to guarantee a match, like a 1 in a billion, to present past reasonable doubt. Whoever submitted that DNA may be sitting in prison. They may have been picked up on another crime, and so the case remains unsolved.
We truly believe that this case is solvable with the DNA that was received at the scene. The perp just needs to be jabbed in another crime, or his DNA submitted into some database, or, we could come along with better DNA extraction and possibly get more alleles out of that sample. John Jones is another victim in this case. We truly believe he wanted this crime solved for not only the families of these girls, but for his Austin community. He had been kicked off the case and eventually retired. He says it's the one case that sticks with him and that it's the one case he would want solved. He's gotten a divorce since then and has become involved in his church's choir. He had worn his green shirt to work that day. We have it posted in our Instagram, and it still hangs in his closet. Jones states the next time he wears his shirt, it will be to announce who killed these girls. We also believe Jones's profile, that these men were evil and that they have definitely done this before. I bet they've done it again since. Sometimes DNA accidentally doesn't make it in the system. Sometimes it is caught in a backlog or is sitting in a box somewhere just waiting to be found. I believe, and I want our listeners to, do you think that the yogurt shop murders will be solved in our lifetime? Why?
Okay, so we've got some theories and questions about this case.
We got lots of questions.
The three-man theory, which was not our top theory, but what has slowly become maybe our top theory.
And which we have kind of developed somewhat on our own. Like there's other people that have talked about another individual being involved, but we really put the case together for you with this theory.
Yeah, so we believe the two men entered the store, like we talked about, committed the crime, and a third lookout stays in the car in the alley. While the men are inside doing the horrible crime, is this third man in his tan car, which was noticed outside in the front parking lot before the crime started. Is he in back trying to jimmy open that back door that they found the crowbar marks on? We don't know, but apparently something happened because the back door is ajar, and I think the men ran out, jumped into that car, and drove off into the night. Again, like we said, they had to have heard the sirens coming.
I was going to say, I
Which is
just want to add to the three men theory. The reason that we believe this is because, like we said, this looks like a very professional crime. These people had done this before. Because it happened so quickly and because the way the fire is set and that evidentiary value of some more pictures and some more information comes out in the early 2000s, we think that it would have taken three men to perpetrate this crime. We believe that it could have been an initiation or two brothers and a third person. Of course, they believe that all of these men are on crack. So are they doing drugs, sitting around one night and say, hey man, I've been casing out this place with these girls, now's our time. So our leading theory is the three men theory. We definitely believe obviously there was two men there, but I'll let Mom tell you about our next theory.
Well, we're going to get into the Las Cruces case in a couple of episodes. So you have not heard the Las Cruces case yet. But one of the theories in the Las Cruces case is the cartel theory. We see a lot of similarities with the way these two crimes were committed, the way the victims are executed, the guns used, a fire set to cover up evidence. Would the cartel have paid off Jorge Barney, Mr. Party Guy Next Door, or even the autopsy tech? That's unlikely. Why would the cartel's motive be? These women and families who were all investigated have no ties to drugs or other legal activity. So we discount the cartel theory.
I mean, sometimes the cartel goes out and does some crazy stuff, but it's definitely not my leading theory.
Another criminal that we're going to talk about in our upcoming kitchen table research broadcast is the Kenneth McDuff theory. Kenneth McDuff is a killer from Texas, and there's a lot of similarities. Young girls, multiple victims, very little DNA left. The location, the timeline, the fact that it was in a yogurt shop, two girls, the coke, the belt, strangulation, controlling the passive burglaries. Jones's profile's dead on when he makes that in that late December press release.
So only one strand out of a possible three would have been collected. So just because that one doesn't match McDuff does not mean that he wasn't there. And we're going to go into it just a little bit more in our next episode. So our next theory is the random attack theory. Jones?
Well, it can't be totally random. Okay, it's pretty clear that the place has been cased before the crime. If it's a stalker, how does wanting to kill one woman lead to at least two men killing all four girls and not even killing his subject? I think we're talking about Therese Price here.
Yeah.
I think this was random. I think it goes back to motive. Motive is important in this case. But what was the motive? Just plain pure evil?
I mean, it has to be. So we know it's not the money. I mean, it's not like these women were involved in things where like revenge would have been a factor, or even if that's the case, like going from wanting to harm one person or stalking one woman to then going in and torturing, killing, and raping and then lighting four women on fire. Again, I really think that if you could pin down the motive, it would give you a better cast of suspects to look at.
So we're going to continue. Those are the theories. Now we've just got questions. We pull these questions kind of out of thin air. We talk about them. We see if we can solve and answer the questions based on what research we've done, or if in fact it's a true question. So here we go with questions.
I'm going to do the first one. Les Carpenter. So, was Les Carpenter involved? We cannot find anything about this guy prior or after. I mean, we can't find anything about him. Mom did some research. I have done some research into the Travis County Medical Examiner's Office. I've actually worked under the Travis County Medical Examiner's Office. So, who is this Les Carpenter and where did he go? Like, do you think that he actually worked for the ME? Who is this guy? And
He
if
has to go for the ME.
okay, so if he's in which I'm not everybody that works at the medical examiner's office wants to become a medical examiner. For example, I stopped at autopsy tech and body removal because you have to go all the way through medical school to be a medical examiner, and you have to go through pathology. It's a very hard course, but to have worked for the medical examiner's office would have mean that they would have done background checks and things like that. So the fact that we really just can't find anything about him is a little bit weird. But why would he target these girls? And how does him coming in after with wanting to take the bodies back and so forth? I mean, does that really make him a suspect? Or do we think he's just kind of an asshole, like our colloquial Karen? So why don't you go into Jorge then?
Okay, so Jorge Barney, who owns the Party Shop, formerly the Party Pig, shares a wall with the yogurt shop, and he's in his office when this crime takes place. I can't find anything about what happened to him either. I know he was questioned extensively. We don't find any testimony from him in the court cases. He said he heard a couple of pops. It's hard to believe that he doesn't hear anything. He was either conducting his own illegal operations, knew something, or has a motive for not coming forward. A fire is set on the wall on the other side of the drywall from where he's supposedly sitting at his desk and watching TV and eating his pizza, and he doesn't hear a thing. He does walk out the back door of his own shop as the police are arriving and going out the back door from the yogurt shop, and says the door was ajar when he walked out of his own shop. So we do know that back door had been open. And the Austin Fire Department also reports that as well.
And that's kind of why we even went with the theory of the cartel is, would they have paid him off? Is he our third man? Being kind of a lookout for these two guys. Does he have a motive? Again, that's kind of what made us look at the cartel theory. But again, we're just like totally pulling this out of our butts because we don't know anything about Jorge Barney. We can't find anything about him or anything really about the party store that he owned. So
let me interject something right here. This is a wild theory that I thought about extensively while I was driving one day. Check this out. What if Jorge Barney closes his store at 7, let's say, okay? He's got work to do in his office. All the girls are at least 2 girls are over at the yogurt shop doing their job. Jorge decides he wants pizza. He walks out his front door. He goes 2 doors down. He gets his pizza. He comes back into his shop. If he didn't lock his shop front door, could a perp have actually entered his store, go out his back door into the alley? That's theory 1. Could a perp have gone up into the crawl space and over into the yogurt shop?
Which sounds crazy, but we have evidence of someone doing that.
That's right. He waits, and then when the crime starts, he comes back through the ceiling tiles into the bathroom in the yogurt shop as the crime started. I know that's far-fetched, but why would somebody come down through a ceiling tile several weeks before? It almost sounds like they were checking out whether you could actually crawl in the crawl space above that strip center. So I just thought of that, and I wanted to put that out there as one of the possibles.
Well, and like we said, what if Jorge Barney is our third perpetrator?
Right. What if it was done?
And maybe somebody paid him a very good amount of money to allow this crime to happen.
Again, motive would be, I don't know, but...
Well, I think motive would be, hey, we know that there's vulnerable women that are left working alone at this late hour, and it's the only store in the strip center that remains open after the 10 o'clock hour. Look, if you pay me $100,000, I'll let you go in there and rape those girls. But then, of course, you think, okay, so now we have 4 women, and now a whole fire has been set. We definitely think that the perps would have been shocked if they were casing the place to find 4 girls instead of 2. So they would have really had to have kind of changed their plan, especially to be able to get away with this.
Right. They had to sit in that car out in front that several people witnessed before any of this started and rework the plan, because now the plan's different because there are 4 girls instead of 2 girls.
That's chilling. Okay, a question that I came across when I was doing the timeline. I think by this time we know that Maria would have seen Army Man, so she would have potentially seen her daughter's killer. And I just find that extremely eerie. Of course, Maria was asked several times, but she's distracted when Daryl walks in because she knows him. So she starts talking with him. They go to the same gym together. Daryl kind of knows the girls. I really wish, man, that Daryl would have just stuck around, or that he would have said something to Maria. And I'm sure that he kicks himself in the butt every day for that. Okay, so our next question is, so Detective Jones, not my co-host, it's confusing. How did Jones in his profile states that they did not take any extra items into the store that night, probably meaning that they didn't find anything like extraneous that wouldn't have belonged there besides the guns. And so I think this does confirm that there was no accelerant used, because how would they have brought accelerant in? It's like, unless our third man theory is true and a man brings gasoline in through the back door after it is pried open. But of course, AFD, APD, no one says that it smells like, nor is there accelerant patterns. But again, it's like this fire burned so hot, and the styrofoam would have had to have left some sort of pattern, don't you think? So are they just saying that outside of the styrofoam pattern that there's not a secondary accelerant pattern?
Yes, I think that's exactly true. I think if somebody poured lighter fluid or gasoline on the floor and you lit a match, you see in movies, that's where I'm taking my best guess from, you see that flame, that gasoline puddle, and it starts waving and getting hotter and moving across the floor.
Yeah.
I think it's much more likely that somebody had lighter fluid or a Zippo lighter in their pocket and were able to were able to sprinkle that over the styrofoam perhaps, so that the styrofoam caught on fire faster.
Yeah, that's one of the other things that we investigated quite extensively, was like the use of a Zippo lighter and the lighter fluid that's found inside of a Zippo. Because our question is, how did they get the original fire started? Normally you need tinder or something to get the fire going. Now, is styrofoam flammable enough that as soon as you light it, it just kind of takes off? But again, it seems like they're putting a lot of eggs, and this styrofoam is gonna burn down all the evidence basket.
Right, and is that the reason Army Man went to the bathroom, was to case out the back of the store to see if there was some kind of, quote, something that could be used to burn?
Well, and that's why we think that they pulled the car to the backside too, was to make sure that the fire is going before they try to make their escape.
True. I get that. I understand that too.
And I just want to restate that the fire burned so hot and so contained in that back corner that actually when AFD comes on scene, they find that cup of ice still sitting there. So the fire wasn't even hot enough to, get to that point.
Right. It never came into the front part of the store.
No, not at all.
The smoke did, but the fire didn't.
It didn't even reach the bathroom if you go look at our map, or the office. It really stayed in that back corner.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the women folding and stacking their clothes. Why do you think they would have put them in a neat stack? I mean, do you think that... And then again, Teresa's, when her apartment's broken into, her panties are found folded into a neat stack. So what's your guess on that?
I have no idea. A neat freak for men that want to kill and rape.
Well, sometimes they do, put serial killers into organized and disorganized. This is obviously an organized crime. And is he so organized that he's like OCD? I mean, why spend the time making these women fold their clothes when they know they're on a tight time table.
I know I cannot explain that. I don't understand that. Obviously, if I were asked to strip and get naked, I would undo my clothes and just leave them in a pile. I'm not going to be folding my clothes.
Yeah, it's like
So
when you
were
get
they
home from a
told?
long day of work, you just kind
Right.
of
Kind
fluff
of
them
throw
off onto the
everything
floor.
down. Maybe some people hang them up, but that's not me.
And I don't think that's a serial killer who's in a rush to rape a woman.
Right. Another question we have is why were no police stationed at the crime scene from the beginning of the investigation until this crime scene was ultimately released? And I have to assume this crime scene was a crime scene for many days. Why was there not anybody positioned at the yogurt shop 24/7? I know the APD was short on staff, but this was the biggest thing that had ever happened in Austin, except the Charles Whitman murders in 1965 from the UT Texas Tower. Why was there crime scene? Why wasn't there any crime scene at the back of the store? If the trash was removed, okay, if the
Like
trash was
just
removed, first of
just
all, this
picking
would
up
have been on a
trash.
Saturday, just picking up trash. The trash would not have come down the alley on a Saturday because trash doesn't get picked up on Saturdays. So is the trash left in the trash can for Saturday and Sunday and then maybe picked up Monday and taken to the dump?
Had they
Well,
just
why
not
isn't
gotten to that back dumpster to see if there was any
right?
evidence in there? And like you said, why didn't
Apparently,
they halt the taking of it?
right. And the forensic investigation team, we spoke about Ms. Rios. She asked one of the policemen to lift up a burned piece of sheetrock, and he said, quote, I don't see anything down there. And that was all the investigation they did on that trash bin out in the alley. So that is just too strange. I mean, that's not the way that would happen today.
I mean, even if they could go back through the trash and it's not from that night, because that night the trash would have been left inside per, the employee manual,
Right.
they still could have seen, maybe receipts or put together a better timeline of other people who had come in that would lead them to other suspects. We're not saying that the guns are in the trash can or anything, but geez, at the site of a murder, going through trash, I feel like is 101.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've already said this, but we'll say it again real quick. If there's no hits of DNA in the database or the hundreds of people that they compared DNA to, then how rare is a 16 allele profile? And the answer is that is not rare at all. There are bukus of people who will share that same 16 allele profile. And that is why the FBI determines that privacy of a human trump a common 16 allele profile. So that maybe that's a reason why we don't have a DNA match or why we don't have a certain DNA match.
But it's
Do
like if
you
they
think
went after these four teenagers so hard, if they have one pop in Austin at the time, are they going to go after that person?
I don't know. I don't know.
I think I do. I hate to say this. I agree with the FBI. If it's going to match thousands and thousands of people and it truly is anonymous and they can't pinpoint which prison or which state it came from, it's really just a drop in the bucket. I mean, it's a needle in the haystack.
It is a needle in the haystack. And this whole DNA stuff that's recently come back up with the 16 allele is just shrouded in mystery. I don't think we know the whole story behind that DNA, frankly.
I don't either, but the fact that people are saying that the FBI is like covering up this huge conspiracy or this or that, or that's not why the FBI is releasing it, I think it's a little over the top. I do feel like Americans like their privacy. You don't want somebody knocking on your door just because your DNA matches somebody that murdered somebody 30 years ago. I mean, that's a little extreme, don't you think? So my next question is going to be, how do you feel about anonymous DNA or genetic DNA testing being used to catch killers, as in the case of the Golden State Killer or James D'Angelo?
I jump up and down. If you can solve a murder by any method, DNA profile, gun profile, fingerprint profile, go for it, because criminals are criminals. And I believe the good guys ought to be on the receiving end of goodness, not death.
Well, the difference between this case and the Golden State Killer is they had I think they had a full elite, like a full profile.
I think they
from
did too.
one
Well,
person.
they didn't have a full profile from him, but they matched it to one of his relatives. Remember that?
Yes. But they
And
had
then they
more than 16
traced back the
alleles.
genealogy and came down to this D'Angelo guy who committed all those rapes.
Right. And what I'm saying, though, is that they had more than a 16 allele profile, though, to work with
Yes.
from the beginning.
Yes.
Right. And
Yes.
I've actually, so we've both studied that case quite a lot. If it interests you, again, that's a rough case. But if it interests you as listeners, we can think about doing it in our next series of episodes that we'll put out. So while I was editing the first episode, and now we're recording the second, you had mentioned in the first episode how you say, how would he have gone to grab her up underneath the armpits, which is what I had theorized from the back. So if he does, so I'm thinking about it. So if he does and he pulls her up into a standing position, she's facing the bathroom, which is on the opposite wall that the fire started. So that was the south wall. So we'll call this the north wall, where all of the blood splatter is found from not only the 3 girls getting shot by the 22, but I'm pretty sure that's where they find the 380 exit wound blood is between the bathrooms. So like you said, if she's picked up and the way she's fallen and found, she should have fallen to the front. She should have fallen with her head towards the bathroom, yet she's fallen with her head back towards the south wall. So
Agreed.
did he literally where, because it goes through the top of her scalp, did he just get her in a position where she wasn't quite standing and just kind of picks her up by the scruff of her neck? Or, I mean, she's naked. So does he just kind of pick her up by the neck or by the arm and hold her while he's shooting her so that she falls backwards instead of forward?
Well, what about this? We know that she's found with a sock. What if he used the sock to control her, which left at least one hand free to have the 380 in to be able to shoot her?
So do you think that ligature, the sock, was put on her before she climbed out of the pile or after? Had to have been before. I mean, why would you put a ligature on somebody that's already dead? So it had to have been while he was raping her?
I don't know. Or as they saw her crawl out of the pile.
Right.
Did someone grab a sock from the top
of
the top of the folded clothes and use that? Because remember, that's a half-hitch knot around Amy's neck.
Right. And the sock is found on her neck, I believe. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So that makes sense. I like that theory. Do you have any other questions or comments?
I do.
Okay.
We talked about the caramel, the toppings for the yogurt being poured into wounds. And I said, I just don't think that you could do that really. And then when we were listening and reading, they say that the cans of toppings exploded. So I think what they're talking about is those cans of chocolate and caramel and brown sugar topping, whatever, exploded from the heat. And that debris and food product came down on the girls on the floor. I think that's what that means.
Sure. The only thing is that when I was reading about it, it says that it was poured inside of their wounds specifically to possibly get rid of evidence.
So there's another question I have, because now you've got two people saying two different things.
Right. Which occurs a lot in this work,
sure.
Because you have one person theorizing something, you have a person that can't remember anything. I mean, some of these people are coming forward with witness statements 10 years when they put the boys on trial, and so it's been a while. And, I know that Daryl has a security cop background, but even people like him can be wrong about eyewitness testimony. I mean, we know how bad eyewitness testimony can be, especially the longer the case goes cold and the more people hear about it or read about it or see about it, they start incorporating those memories into the current memory that they have. So when Daryl talks about this, I know that they interview him originally, but then he's interviewed a second time when the boys go to court. And so what are the differences between those testimonies, I wonder,
Yeah, interesting. Although I would think if anybody was able to give consistent testimony, it would have been Daryl with his background. Enjoyed the visit today. Enjoyed being able to present you guys information.
Go ahead and wrap up this case.